Hello and welcome to the World Wanderers podcast, a proud part of the Wander Barn Podcast Network.
I'm Ryan.
I'm Amanda.
And we're your hosts.
We're a traveling couple and digital nomads taking you on our adventures as we explore locations, destinations, and careers.
Enjoy the show.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the World Wanderers podcast. We're really excited that you are joining us today for this episode of the show. And I am really excited to be joined by Alice Nettleingham from Teacake Travels today. And this is a really fun interview because I actually got to do this one solo. Ryan was not available at the time that I interviewed Alice. And so we took the time to have a little bit of a girl chat and to talk about what it's like to be a woman traveling the world. For most of her travels, Alice has actually traveled completely solo. So being a solo female traveling all over the world. We talk about her travel story, what got her traveling, starting her blog, living full time off of a blog, tips she's learned from traveling all by herself, and what she's doing now as she's transitioned into a different part of her life with different work that she's doing. So there is a lot of good stuff jam-packed into this interview, and I really hope that you enjoy it as much as I did. All right, without further ado, here is Alice. Alice, welcome to the podcast today. I'm super excited to have you here with me today.
Thank you so much. It's such a pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Yeah. I'm really excited for this conversation. And this is actually really fun because normally for the World Wanderers, Ryan and I do all the interviews together. So it's fun because I get to drive this one solo, and I'm stoked to chat with you about all things women traveling solo as females, all that good stuff. But I think a good place to start is where your travel story begins and how you first fell in love with travel.
Oh, yes. So let's start from the beginning. So, I was definitely one of those women that always felt that I could never travel. I thought travel's not available to me. I can't travel. I don't have the money. I don't have the expertise, etc., etc. But it was a very rapid series of events, I would say. So I was literally sitting on the train. I was working full time as a psychologist, and this girl sat next to me and she was reading a psychology paper. And I was like, oh, hey, what are you reading? Just trying to make conversation. Anyway, she had just got back from India teaching English. And this was like just so magical to me. And we spoke for the whole train journey. And by the time I got off that train, I was like, that's it. I'm quitting my job. I'm quitting my boyfriend. I'm quitting where I'm living. I'm going to go and travel. And I was so inspired that I decided I'm going to teach English. That's how I'm going to do it. And that weekend, I went on a course to learn how to teach English. I met a guy there and he said, where are you going to go? I was like, I've got no idea. And he was like, how about South Korea? That's where I'm thinking of going. I was like, oh, okay. Well, I don't really know anything about that. Let's go. And that's literally what happened. I just went from zero to hero in 3 months and just quit everything. I think it was just the right time, right place. I knew that I wanted something bigger in my life. And I'm just so glad that I seized what essentially the universe gave to me. And that was 10 years ago. And I haven't stopped since. So it's been going very, very well.
Amazing. I love hearing that. And so did you go to South Korea? Was that the first place you went?
I did. Yeah. So I was like, yeah, I know nothing about it. I really want an adventure. I'm going to go to South Korea. And it just started from there. Since then, I don't really keep count. Some people like really count their countries, but I reckon it's 50 plus. Yeah, it's been a wild ride and a very educational and empowering one. I guess we'll kind of talk about reasons to travel, but for me, it was always to see what I was capable of. And I'm just so grateful for everything that I've learned along the way.
Yeah, absolutely. I can totally relate to that too. And I think that there's just something about, obviously not everyone loves to travel, but I think, everyone who's listening to this can probably relate to that feeling of getting out on the road and you just feel like alive in a way that I feel like is really hard to replicate when you're just at home, working full time, kind of doing the same thing in and day out. Do you know what I mean?
100%. And I just knew my soul, I was not sleeping at night. I was just awake at 3 a.m. thinking there's more, because I always had done what my parents had told me to do. And I'd done everything that I'd been told to do, and I still wasn't happy. And I just thought something's wrong. There's more. and travel was that avenue to something much bigger.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the ways I've kind of described it is like, I don't know, on the outside, like working corporate, everything was fine. I made a good salary. My job was actually like pretty well suited for my skill sets. Like I was not thriving in the position. My manager was a bit like Michael Scott from The Office, which, is maybe not the most ideal situation. But I just felt like I was like wearing like a dress that was like my size, but didn't fit. If that makes sense.
A good way to put it. That's a brilliant way to put it. I feel you on that one. Very much. Yes.
Yeah. It's not that it's like necessarily wrong. It's just like, this isn't quite right. Like I need to try a different dress, like it's just this dress doesn't fit in this size. It's not the wrong size. And for me, that was like, I need to have a bit more freedom. I can't work in a cubicle just doing the same thing every single day. I just can't do it. I had the same feeling as you, like there has to be more to life. Like I remember being like 22 in this first full-time job being like, am I really going to do this till I'm 65? Like it just seems like that's a bit of a waste of like 43 years.
Yeah. And this is the thing. I just thought, I've just done everything. I've been such a good girl. I've just done everything I've been told. And, why am I not happy? It was, it was a pretty confusing time, but I'm so glad that I did follow my intuition and just went for it.
Mm-hmm, absolutely. And so for you, have you always traveled like on your own as a solo female?
Well, I would say like at the beginning, I was incredibly stubborn. People tried to travel with me, but I was just so determined to see what I could do, what I liked, what I was capable of, what was possible, that I was probably a little bit rude. I would just meet people traveling and be like, oh, hey, do you want to go here to go? I'd be like, nope, I'm just going to go on this motorbike and see what happens. But I have to admit, as time has gone on, I really started to want to share those experiences with other people, but I had to do it solo first. I just had to, because I just wanted to learn everything that I possibly could. And I just felt that if someone else had been there, then I would have never have truly known who I was and all of my needs. So yeah. How about you?
Yeah, so most of my travels have been with Ryan, my co-host of the show, and then my husband. But after we had traveled for like 2 6-month backpacking trips, like basically around the world, we both were like, I think it'd be really good for us to travel solo, do like a couple solo trips to places we're individually excited about. And so I've done a couple of solo trips, and I felt like it was so nice to see that I was capable of filling in those gaps that Ryan would have filled in normally, because, we have different strengths and weaknesses, and there's certain aspects of our travels that we take on. Something even as little as like, sometimes it's like, oh, okay, I'll go get the seats on the bus. Like you put our bags underneath the bus because, he's stronger than I am. So he can take, my big backpack a lot easier, like, lift it up for me. And it's so empowering to be like, okay, I'm going to do all of this by myself and see who I can meet and what I can do and what my experience is like. So yeah, I think that I really recommend, like, I love traveling with Ryan, obviously, like he's my life partner and that type of thing. But I think that there's so much that I can gain from doing things on my own.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, it's so kind of cool that we've done it opposite ways. That's the thing, right? We're just constantly evolving, we're constantly learning. And, I'm sure that you have skills about traveling with people that I haven't quite perfected yet. So I need to learn a little bit from you as well.
I mean, traveling with a partner has its ups and downs for sure.
Yes.
But I feel like there's something, especially like in this world where we're so connected and we're always like engaged with other people, I feel like being able to just like be in your own company is a hugely beneficial skill.
Oh, yes. I mean, how relevant is that right now whilst we're recording, right? 2020, a lot of people have had to really learn to be with themselves and actually, take that time to really feel the feels, so to speak.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, 100%. And so I think for a lot of people, and especially women, they kind of get this idea that maybe it's not safe for them to go by themselves. So they should find another girlfriend to go with, or they should, go with their partner if they have one. And I really feel like in general, like my experience has been that the world is quite a safe place. People are very kind. I'd love to hear kind of your thoughts around, what it's actually like to travel like long term on your own as a woman.
Yeah, brilliant question. I mean, yes, my travels have not been complete 100% rainbows and unicorns, but like 9 times out of 10, the generosity and the love and the care from locals has just been phenomenal. Every time I have got myself in a spot of bother, people have helped me 100%. Gosh, I mean, I remember this one time that I was traveling in Bangladesh. I was traveling solo, and I was right down south on this tiny island. And there were some local kids on the beach. They stole my phone, okay? They just straight up snatched the phone from my hands and they ran off across these fields from the beach into this tiny village. And I thought, well, I'm going after them. So I kind of ran across these fields into this village. And they were just nowhere to be seen. And I just burst into tears. And obviously all these like locals are just looking at me like, what on earth is going on? But to cut the long story short, just through trying to explain everything through actions, etc., they understood that I had lost this phone. And the whole village went looking, they went searching for this phone. And I actually, at one point, this like local was kind of signaling to me this kind of throwing motion. I thought, oh my gosh, like, because it had everything on there. It had all of my photos, everything. And I thought, my God, these kids have thrown it in the sea. These kids have just thrown it in the sea. But lo and behold, one guy from the village came up to me with my phone, and the kids had buried it in the sand, and he was like dusting it off of his shirt, like trying to give it back to me. I thought, this is just complete kindness, because these kids were clearly part of their community, but they helped me, they really took their time and care to help me. And I was so grateful for it. Yeah, just little things like that, really. You are never alone. And even in that instance, we didn't speak a lick of the same language, but it was completely understood about the help that I needed. And yeah, I have to just put it out there, ladies, like, never worry about not speaking the same language. We're all human. You're going to be absolutely fine in that sense. Because a lot of women, they do say that to me. What if I get sick? What if something bad happens? People are going to care. People will care. And even in the UK, of course, I'll do exactly the same thing when I see someone in need as well. You're going to be absolutely fine.
Yeah, I love that. I love hearing that story. So thanks for sharing that. And I think it's just a reminder that like the majority of people are innately kind and do want to help. And I think you're totally right about, there are a lot of fears. I mean, there's fears about just the idea of like going on a plane by yourself, and like, what do you do with your stuff if you go to the bathroom, and where do you stay, and then how do you like get food by yourself? And I think it's just reminding yourself that like if you can do all of that at home, you can do it in another country. You don't necessarily have to speak that language or look the same as those people. It's things that you'll be able to figure out.
Yes, and you are fully capable. It has been done before, and you can definitely replicate it. There's nothing that you cannot do. You just got to do it. You really have.
For sure. Are there any, things that you do to make sure that you do feel safe in places that you're going around the world?
Yes. So there's definitely some hacks that I do use. I mean, I know, especially if you're a budget traveler, that it could be so tempting to get that flight that lands at 2 a.m., because it's the cheapest. But to be honest, I don't recommend it. Get a flight that's going to arrive during the day or at a decent time. And I love spontaneity. I love adventure. I really love challenge, but I do make sure that I have somewhere booked for the first night when I arrive somewhere. And I make sure that I know exactly how I'm going to get there and that it's a good, reputable place. It just rests your mind, when you're entering somewhere completely new, just to know that you're in good hands. So I always do that. Also equally, I usually book into hostels or like Airbnbs where I'm going to speak straight to the local, because what you might think is a really interesting and cool area, they might be like, no, don't go that way. So I really like to get the insider knowledge as soon as I can. I just speak to locals, what's good, like what should I miss, like what should I probably just like avoid. And you can take that advice with a pinch of salt too. Some people will always be like, oh no, don't go there, that's crazy. But I remember when I went to Japan, I went straight for the red light district. I was so intrigued. I really wanted to see what it was like. And some locals were like, don't go there, but I was like, no, I'm gonna go. I really want to see what it's like. And I was absolutely fine. So that's the thing, right? You can take advice and you can choose to take it or not. That's your choice.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. I can imagine. I adore Japan. Japan's one of my favorite countries in the world. And I just love Japanese culture. I can just imagine like Japanese people being like, in general, just like horrified. Like, don't go there. Don't see that. There's so many other things about our beautiful cities to see.
I was like, no, I want to see that, so I was very curious, and it was definitely an education, Amanda. Definitely.
Yeah, I bet. We actually didn't go there while we were in Japan. So we're hopefully going back in 2021. So maybe I'll have to add that to the list.
Yes, do it.
Sounds good. And so I love your tips about not flying in the middle of the night or not arriving too late, knowing how you're going to get from, the airport or the bus station to wherever you're staying, and then always having a place booked at night. Those are definitely like rules of thumb that I follow as well. Do you do any like added communications in terms of like letting family or friends know where you're going, like especially on travel days and stuff like that? Or are you kind of at the point now where you're like, they just know like I'm somewhere?
Yeah, I mean, I have to admit, actually, for better or worse, I have got to that point. I know some people, they'll like speak to their family every day. Sometimes I don't speak to my parents for months. And that isn't because we don't have a good relationship. They just know that I can handle myself. But yeah, actually, interestingly, from a kind of social media perspective, there were actually, because of some of the countries that I was traveling in, I wouldn't actually post live on the day. As a blogger, as a content creator, of course, I want to share all of those experiences, but I kind of learned in some countries it's actually best to delay it by a day or two. Some people can get very hooked on where you are and what you're doing at a certain time, and sometimes that isn't the best. So I would tell my closest friends, hey, social media is showing this, but actually I'm here. So I would do that. Depending on some particular countries I was traveling in, just for like an extra safety precaution.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's actually a really, really good idea. That's something that, I mean, just honestly, just so that I like don't have to be on my phone constantly, we usually just like, take photos and videos, during the day, and then I'll post them like a day or two later. And I hadn't really thought about the idea of that way, like nobody can kind of go and find you. But I think that totally makes sense, because especially if you have like a big following, you don't want somebody like rocking up at the restaurant that you're eating at and that type of thing. I think that it's good to be cautious in that way, because there's definitely like, there's some trolls on the internet.
Yes. And it doesn't even have to be about you being a big blogger or vlogger or influencer or anything like that. Some people will look for that to see where you are in that location and purposely go that way. So yeah, just an extra bonus tip there.
No, I really like that. And then in terms of places you've been, is there anywhere that you felt like, maybe a bit uncomfortable as a solo female traveler, or felt like maybe it wasn't, as safe as some other places?
Well, this is a thing. Like, I really went to India wanting to kind of prove, that it was absolutely fine and that any woman can go there. But I'm sorry, going as a solo female can be a little more challenging than other places. Yeah, I mean, I loved it. I can't wait to go back. I have been back quite a few times. But, you got to be ready. You got to be ready for India, especially, when you're in Delhi, for example. It can be pretty full on. So yeah, India was a little bit difficult for me. Just trying to think where else really. I mean, I have been to some pretty challenging countries, Pakistan, Bangladesh, etc., etc. But yeah, I'm afraid what they might say about India can sometimes be true, unfortunately.
Yeah, we haven't been to any of those countries that you mentioned, but I feel like India has always felt like a country. I actually thought about doing my yoga teacher training there, and then I ended up going to Bali. And part of it was that I felt a little bit scared to go by myself. And I was having a bit of like grappling in my head around like, but you can do it, you can. And then I was like, but that also sounds like really scary. Maybe it'd just be a better place to go, with Ryan, or maybe even with like a group of friends or something like that, since the country has such a different culture from, where I'm from.
Yeah.
I love that you tackled it on your own.
Yes, I mean it was an amazing experience. I saw so much. I hung out with some amazing people, but it is what it is. Yeah.
Amazing. And so I'm curious kind of on the other side of that. So for anyone who's listening, who's like, maybe feeling the call to travel, they want to go by themselves and they're kind of like, I don't know where to start. Are there some good, like, I guess, beginner friendly countries for solo female travelers?
Yeah, great question. So yeah, if you kind of want to do solo female travel light, I always do recommend Thailand as like the perfect place to start if you're heading to Asia. Great infrastructure, lots of English, brilliant food, loads and loads of cool people to hang out with, whether that's locals or expats. Like, it's just a perfect place to start, in my opinion. And in Europe, well, I'm quite new to like travel in Europe. I always kind of told myself, I'll do Europe later because Asia's so fascinating, it's changing so quickly. But yeah, I'm actually going to say England. England, Scotland, Wales. If you want to do Northern Ireland or Ireland, they're all brilliant places, and obviously we've got like really good infrastructure. I really do recommend it. But obviously depends on your budget, what you want to do. But yeah, I would go for the UK if you want to do Europe, and if not, go for Thailand in Asia.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love those recommendations. I always think it's really interesting culturally how, people from different countries kind of like choose to travel, because for Canadians, backpacking in Europe is like hugely, hugely popular, especially when you're younger. And it's kind of funny to me now because Europe's really not that affordable, especially like the pound is like worth significantly more than the Canadian dollar, and the euro is as well. So it's not really like the cheapest place to go. Like now that I've been to more places, I'm like, like Mexico, Central America, South America, Asia, like so much more affordable.
Right.
Yet most people head to Europe from Canada. And I think probably the States too. Like it's like first backpacking trip is like heading to Europe.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, obviously I was like, I'm going straight to Asia. So yeah, so intriguing to hear the flip side of that.
Yeah. And I think Australians Australians are really everywhere, but I feel like they do a lot of like Asia as well because it's close. And then a lot of them do working holiday visas like over in Canada and travel the US and Mexico and stuff, which is like every time I meet an Australian living in Canada, I'm like, why are you here? There's so many cool places in the world. Why are you in Canada? It's really cold here and it's really expensive.
So funny. I did love her in Canada, I have to say, though. I started in Quebec and then obviously like went down to Montreal and Toronto and did the good old classic Niagara Falls. I loved it. I thought it was great. It was very cool. Yeah, very cool to visit there.
Yeah, no, for sure. Canada's an amazing country. I think it's just being from Canada. I kind of have the same maybe thoughts as you with Europe. Like, oh, I can do like Canada later, like I should.
Yeah.
Well, I'm still, young and able to deal with jet lag pretty well. I should get to the other side of the world.
God, I feel because I just turned 36 actually, and I'm like, oh, jet lag. Oh, this is new. I'm starting to feel that a bit more now.
Yeah, totally. I love the idea of England, though. I mean, London's one of my favorite cities in the world. I feel like England, especially if you are from an English speaking country, is great because you don't have to be worried about the language barrier. And London is one of the most booming cities in the world. And it's similar when you go into Scotland, Ireland. Their major cities are very similar to major cities in North America. I've always felt like very at home in the UK. I think it
That's
feels
nice.
Yeah. So I think that's a great recommendation of places to go.
And just culturally, it is mind blowing. I've never known so many different accents in one country. It's just like, even if you go to the next town next to me, like it's so different. Yeah, because I'm actually on the border of Essex. I don't know if you know a lot about Essex, but it's a lot of self-tan and short dresses and a very distinct accent. Which is nothing like, me across the water. So yeah, it's a great place to explore. And just the culture is obviously mind blowing. So many castles, so many amazing historical things. So yeah, it's a real treat.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I want to jump back to your story. So I know that you said you went to South Korea, you were teaching English. At one point, did you get into blogging, content creating, and that type of thing?
Yeah, so I pretty much taught English for 5 years straight, and I loved it. But there was just a point where I wanted to be even more creative. I just started my blog purely for passion. It was just a hobby. And I kind of feel it was at a really good time. It was around 2015. Blogging was very much about personal stories and just sharing all of your knowledge. And then from there, it just exploded. For better or worse, I kind of sold my soul to the internet. I just always blogged so openly and honestly. But I really wanted to share the life lessons that I had to inspire other people. It exploded quick. People really loved what I was doing. And obviously I got to the point, I was like, hang on a minute, this could actually be like my full-time job. So I finally quit teaching and then just went full throttle. But yeah, it's been a brilliant ride so far. Obviously I've moved on to even more endeavors now, but it was a pure joy while I was really in the thick of it, definitely.
Yeah, that's amazing. And so when it came to teaching English, were you doing more teaching contracts, like teaching in South Korea at a school and then teaching in different countries that way, or were you teaching more online?
Yeah, so everything was face to face. I was so sure about that because I wanted to be completely immersed in the culture. So South Korea at that time had a program called EPIC, which is literally English programming in Korea. And it was a brilliant introduction because they flew you over there. Everybody started at the same time in terms of teaching. It was just amazing. It was such an immersive experience. And I kind of did the same from there. I went to China. I got into teaching in universities, and with anything, it was all about word of mouth. I eventually started teaching for a private kindergarten school. And that was purely from referrals, and that was an excellent experience. And just in terms of traveling, when I was blogging in the beginning, I was riding around on a motorbike, and if I wanted to stop and teach English and earn more travel money, I just did. I would track down schools that needed teachers. I'd work there for a bit and then move on. So it was definitely a brilliant way to earn money whilst exploring the world. And I loved it. It was amazing. It really was.
Yeah, that sounds awesome. So you were able to teach and live in South Korea and China, and then did you live and teach anywhere else?
Yes, so I was in Vietnam for a little bit. I was also teaching in Thailand, and I even did a stint back in Europe. It was fantastic. I was teaching in tiny villages in Germany and Austria and Poland. It was a great life. It really was. Yeah, I love doing so many different things. I wish I could do all of these things at once.
Yeah, for sure. And so you were kind of full-time hours as an English teacher?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it was full time. And then obviously, as I really started to solo travel by myself, then I just kind of picked up hours here and there when I wanted. And that worked perfectly well as well.
Yeah, that's great. And then after 5 years, you said, of doing that, you were able to make the transition into full-time blogging?
Yeah, I was like, okay. I can do this. Things are going very well. I'm going to get to full-time travel blogging. That's exactly what I did. And I really got into the different travel communities. There was a lot of conferences at that time, and just connected online with lots of amazing people. And that's how I did it. And just wrote from the heart, wrote honestly, authentically. And always had a mission. I always said on my blog, I want to empower women to live their full potential, push their boundaries, face their fears, just get out there and really do it. So yeah, lots of fun, so much fun.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. I feel like too, that's like such a great resource, because I think I know for me, like I often will turn to the internet, as I think so many people do, to start doing like my research, like I'll start with like, can women travel alone, for example, and being able to find stories of people who are actually doing the thing that you want to do, whatever that is so empowering to like see somebody else who's like, hey, look at all these places I went to and look at all the amazing experiences I had. And this is how you can do it too is so great.
100%, because this is when it comes down to mindset as well. Like, you have to believe that what you want is actually available and that it's possible. When this girl sat down next to me in the train, for example, suddenly my mind was like, oh, hang on a minute. She's done it. Why can't I? And it's exactly the same when you read a blog or watch a vlog. You're like, okay, if that chick is doing it, I can do it, right? So it's all about mindset and knowing that what you want is available to you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love that you brought that up, because I think that is so powerful. I feel like I've seen like people of all different life stages, traveling around the world and doing these things that maybe at some points in my life, I was like, oh, that won't be possible type thing. I feel like one thing, I mean, obviously being like going through the traditional path of, public school, university, and then getting a full-time job. And Ryan and I had taken kind of like a gap between university and jobs. And it was kind of like told to us like, okay, you like had your fun, like now you get your job. And that's where we were like, oh, so we're just going to do this for like 40 some odd years. And where I really started questioning things, but it's interesting how it's kind of like people will believe that things are possible in some instances, but not others. And it takes a lot of your own believing in yourself. Like, I think it took us being like, no, just because we've like endeavored in full-time jobs doesn't mean we have to work these same jobs forever. Like, if it's not serving us, we're going to leave them and go do something that does serve us. But it's hard. It's hard because you have to have that mindset around making it happen. And another example that comes to mind is we have like quite a few friends who from the travel space that travel with kids. And I feel like that's one thing that you hear a lot, especially as a traveler, like, oh, if you want to have kids someday, then you'll have to stop traveling. And I was telling a friend who has little kids, I was like, oh, you should follow my friends. Like, they're traveling with their little kids around the world. And even for her, she was like, oh, I'm so glad it's working for them. But like, that wouldn't work for us. And I was like, oh, okay. Well, if you don't want it, that's fine. Like, you don't have to want to do this thing, but it is possible if you want it.
Yes. And I was actually having this conversation with a friend just a couple of days ago. We've come from a generation where our parents kind of had one job and that was it for life. You did that and then you just stuck with it. But now we're obviously in a world where you can change. You can change. Your past does not define your future. Your degree does not define the next job you choose. Like, your location does not define where you're going to live next. Anything is possible. You just have to step into it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, 100%. I think that is something important for, I feel like really everyone to remember, but it's I think it's so true for, especially people kind of, in our generation specifically, is like, I think we've watched, our grandparents and our parents work the same career for so long. And for a lot of us, at least, myself, that feels like very monotonous. And I'm kind of like, but do I have to do that? Because it seems like I don't.
And it's true. You don't. Yeah. And that's the thing. Every time I've changed careers, people are like, what? Why are you going to do that? Like, just stick with what you know. I'm like, nah, I'm just going to mix it up. I need that variety in my life. Yeah.
Yeah, same. I actually find it's really interesting, especially with like relatively young people, like people in maybe their late 20s or in their 30s, when they're like, oh, I don't want to really like change careers now because I've been spending like, I've spent 5 to 10 years like working my way up on this other one. And I'm like, yeah, but you're going to work for like 35 more years. Like, wouldn't it be better to spend that time doing something you enjoy? Like, if you're already bored of it, like, why would you not go back to school or take the leap? Or, maybe you take a pay cut, or you don't get to just be a manager or a director or a CEO, whatever. But like, wouldn't it be worth that so that you can find happiness in what you're doing? It just seems so obvious to me,
Yeah, but that is the thing. I think people get so stuck and think they just can't, or it just wouldn't be possible. It's always good to have an open mind and know that you can do whatever you want to do.
Yeah, absolutely. I definitely agree with that. And so one thing I'm curious about is once you started travel blogging full time, were you traveling full time as well? Like traveling destination to destination quite a bit for like the full year?
Yes, pretty much. There were periods where I would stay in a place for a lot longer. I would say I've never been a super fast traveler. I always believe in quality over quantity, but there were definitely periods where it was nuts, to say the least. There was I did the Mongol Rally, for example. It's when you drive from the UK to Mongolia in a car with an engine which is 1.2 liters or less. It was mad. It breaks my heart because I've been to Iran, okay? But the truth, when people say to me, oh my gosh, you went to Iran, it must have been amazing. I'm like, do you want the truth? because the truth is that I only had 3 days in Iran, and I was driving most of that time, and all I saw in Iran was a really rubbish waterfall and a terrible Domino's pizza. And it's just it breaks my heart, but it just is the truth, because the next country that we were going to was Turkmenistan, and it's quite hard to get the visa anyway. And you have to enter the country on the date that you write down on the visa. So we just had to race for Iran. It breaks my heart that that's happened. I just hope that I can go back and really see the country for what it is. But yeah, I mean, there were just some days we were just driving. That was too fast for me, When I'm in a country, I want to smell it. I want to taste it. I just want to feel the like all of the earth underneath my feet and just soak it all in. And I don't know, if you travel too fast, personally, I just feel that everything's just gonna fade into one. Bloggers talk about blogger burnout, right? There was one point I was flying here, I was flying there, and I was like, what day is it? What country am I in? And I had to slow down.
Yeah, 100%. I think it's like, especially when you're creating content, it's like so hard to actually create the content when you're just like consistently like living that, like the travels, right? It's like at some point you need to like slow down a little bit so you can actually write about it and edit photos and share on social media and that type of thing. Like it is, I think one of the things that's interesting about travel blogging or working in the travel space is like you still do have to do the work. It's not like, people just pay you for putting up nice Instagram stories.
Exactly. Yeah, and I did have to stop. I had to stop to just really recalibrate and kind of super boost that creativity again, because it was just getting a little bit too much.
Absolutely. We've actually had it was a friend we met traveling. He's done the Mongol Rally as well. We interviewed him, probably like four or so years ago, but it just sounded like a wild time.
It's mad. It's mad, Amanda. I'm telling you straight up. If you want madness, like just do the Mongol Rally. It's madness.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Maybe it's something we'll have to cross off the bucket list at some point because it sounds pretty fun. But I love that you were able to have that experience. And I'm curious, as you've, entered 5 years of blogging, I know you've got some other stuff on the go. What does it kind of look like now in terms of what you're working on?
Yeah, so I just got to the point where, I love blogging. I love it so much, but it got to the point where I just really wanted to combine my superpowers together, because before I was a travel blogger, I was a psychologist, before I even traveled. And as my readers were communicating to me through the blog, they're like, yeah, I get it. Okay. I know that I need to do this to travel, to get from A to B, I need to do that. But I don't have the confidence, I just don't believe that I can do that. Something's stopping me. And I was also seeing in the travel blogging industry that a lot of content creators actually didn't have the confidence to charge their worth or to pitch themselves to brands, or there was a lot of imposter syndrome going on. So I was like, right, it's time to combine everything together. So yeah, right now I really work with content creators to really help them get over self-doubt and procrastination mind blocks, to really unleash their confidence and clarity and ultimately business success. So that's exactly what I'm doing right now. It's a fascinating job and I love it. It's so great to just see people break through that procrastination and self-doubt, which is holding them back from, living their life, but also having a very highly successful business. So yeah, that's what I'm working on right now.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love that. And so obviously things have been pretty weird in 2020. Maybe let's talk, briefly about that. Where were you kind of around the time that the pandemic hit?
Yeah, so it was actually a bit of a blessing. I decided to pivot my my work a couple of months before everything went a little bit pear-shaped. So I was actually in the UK just working on the business, getting everything together. It was a little bit of a surprise, I have to admit. I didn't think that I was going to be hanging out in the UK that long. I got locked down with my parents. On the southeast coast. I was like, okay. I'm in a town where people go to retire. But I do feel blessed. I was by the beach. It was beautiful just to, go for a morning run and kind of get my things together in that setting. So yeah, I was hanging out in the UK a lot longer than I thought I would be. I'm in Bulgaria currently. Just kind of lapping up the mountains. I managed to get a flight out. I didn't know if I was going to make it, Amanda. I was like, am I going to be able to get this flight? But I'm glad that I did do that. And, a change of scenery always helps. And we have to travel safely, but still, I feel that if you can get to a different location just to kind of recharge and refresh your mind, then do it if you can.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. It's funny that you mentioned getting locked down with your parents. Ryan and I were actually living in Panama when the pandemic was happening, and things were happening so fast. And so we decided to go back to Canada. We just were like, there's a lot of countries between Panama and Canada. Like, if things get weird, we want to be in Canada for this. And Panama went into a really intense lockdown, way more intense than Canada ever did. So we were grateful we went home, but we don't have a place in Canada. And we entered as the whole country was going into lockdown. All the businesses were closed, and we don't even own pillows. We don't own anything, you know what I mean? Other than the clothes and stuff we travel with. And half our stuff was at my parents', half our stuff was at Ryan's parents', which they live 8 hours driving apart from each other. And our car was not available to us. It was at Ryan's parents'. We were at my parents'. Anyways, we ended up spending 6 weeks between our two parents in lockdown, which is the most time we've spent living with our parents since we lived at home when we were 18. We're in our 30s.
Everybody's still alive? Everyone's okay?
Yeah, it actually went surprisingly well.
Good.
I think, at the end of a really intense 2 week, because you have to quarantine for 14 days when you arrive in Canada still. Or maybe not by the time this airs. Let's fingers crossed that's not the case. But at the time and up until the time of recording in November, that was still the case in Canada. So yeah, we had a really intense quarantine where we basically weren't allowed to do anything. Everything was closed. And at the end of it, we had a chat with my parents, like, this went actually pretty well. Like, my parents were like, you guys are pretty good roommates. And I was like, so are you. Like, this went a lot better than I think it could have.
I mean, honestly, 2020 has just dealt us such an interesting set of cards. You know, everyone has just been dealt these cards. Like, if you played a game, you'd be like, whoa, what are these cards? But, you know, with all the cards that you get, you know, you have to play them well, right? You just do the absolute best with the hand that you've been dealt. And yeah, there are gems in there. You may initially think, you know, what the hell is this? But there are always gems in these moments. And yeah, I just hope everyone out there has managed to play their cards as best they can.
Yeah, 100% with whatever circumstances they have. It's a really great point, and that's something we've thought about too. You know, there was definitely a moment of like mourning all of the adventures that got canceled between you know, March and I guess like October essentially. And then we made the decision similar to you to leave Canada. And I think that I completely agree with what you say. Like, if you are able to travel safely and you're comfortable with it, and there's a country that you feel like you want to go to, I think that like for us, it was like really good for mental health. Honestly, like we needed to make a change in pace because it's the same as us. We spent way longer in Canada than we intended, and it was a blessing. There's lots of beautiful things about it, but it was time for us to go.
Yeah. And I can also completely echo that. You know, my mental health was definitely changing, and I knew that I had to change, or something had to change, you know, in order for me to be happy and healthy. And yeah, if you can make that change, then just go for it. I think sometimes we might think that nothing can be done, but there is always a way. Definitely.
100%. I completely agree. And I'm so glad that you're safe and happy and healthy in Bulgaria.
Yes, straight back at you. Yeah, you too. I'm glad that you two are good too.
Amazing. Thank you. And Alice, I've loved this conversation. Honestly, I could probably just keep you on the phone all day, but this has been so fun. I'm curious if you can tell listeners where they can go to find you so they can read your amazing travel blog, follow along with what you're up to, maybe learn a little bit more about solo female travel if that's something they're interested in.
Yeah, so let's have a little think. So if you want to read all about my solo female travels, then go to teacaketravels.com. Think of a cup of tea and a piece of cake, and you'll be absolutely fine. teacaketravels.com. Also, I co-host Girls Talk Travel with my lovely friend Meg. If you really want to get some really cool info on solo female travel and just girls travel in general, then just search for Girls Talk Travel. You'll find us on everything pretty much. And if you're really interested in really busting those procrastination and self-doubt mind blocks that are stopping you from your success, then I recommend coming to say hello to me on Instagram. You'll find me at Speak to Alice.
Amazing. Thank you for all of that. We'll make sure there's links to all of that in the show notes. And thank you again for your time today and for sharing your stories and your wisdom.
It's been an absolute joy. Yeah, thank you so much, Amanda. It's been cool. I really like this girls' hour.
Yeah, no, I like it too. Might have to have more of these. Kick Ryan off the show a little bit more. Thanks so much.
Thanks for listening to this episode. If you want more, make sure to check out The World Wanders Insider, available on Patreon at patreon.com/theworldwanderers.
For show notes, head over to theworldwanderers.com. Find us on social media at The World Wanderers Podcast and join the private Facebook community at World Wanderers, a community for travelers.
You can always get in touch with us at info@theworldwanderers.com. And if you enjoyed the show, don't forget to subscribe and leave a review. It really helps us find new listeners.
See you next time.